This season of The Mandalorian has annoyed me to no end because today's episode was absolutely brilliant. Like, I loved every single second of it. And it really frustrates me because why can't this show be as consistently good as this every single episode, down to the writing, the visuals, the performances, the way it is shot, the dialogue. Everything is just so better than some of the absolute subpar rubbish that we have had so far this season, and I say that with honest conviction because honestly, so much of this season has been really, really, really bad to the point where I haven't even been interested in watching the next episode beyond the fact that I kind of have to for my job. If I didn't have to watch The Mandalorian on the day to make a review, I wouldn't be. And so, when I watch an episode like this, I am just so bewildered as to why it cannot be as consistently good every single week. Now, yes, I know that not every episode of a TV show is going to be perfect, but consistency is what makes things work. And if we could have a show that is at least consistently at the level of this episode, we would have such a good Star Wars show. Also, there will be spoilers in this review, and I have just got back from Star Wars Celebration. This video isn't scripted at all, so it may be a little bit more rambly than my other reviews. So the episode starts out like Blade Runner, like literally it looked like an episode of Blade Runner. We're on Coruscant and we're following Elia Kane through the back alleys or whatnot. She's being all secretive, and then she meets a probe droid and she meets Moff Gideon, who finally shows his face, and he's basically talking about how the plan has to continue to go together and that they need to focus despite the fact that the Mandalorians are starting to cause a little bit of a problem for the resurgent Empire, let's call them. Then it instantly switches to Moff Gideon in person and he's walking through these halls and it looked good. The sets looked very good. I really enjoyed the red ray shields or whatever they were. And he ends up meeting a group of Imperials around like a HoloNet table, I guess. And it is a dark council of sorts. It is a bunch of figures, Imperial figures from across the galaxy who are banding together, pretending to be Imperial warlords who are fighting each other, but they're actually trying to serve one bigger goal, and that is the resurgence of the Empire. It's here that we meet Brendol Hux, the father of Armitage Hux from the sequel trilogy. We meet Gilad Pellaeon, and while he believes that Thrawn is the key to the Empire and that when he returns, that's when the Empire will be able to take shape again and to regain their strength, he is supposedly still completely missing at this point. Like, the rest of this council have no clue where he is, they have heard nothing about him, and it's all kind of hearsay from Pellaeon about how he's going to return and save the Empire. Moff Gideon then states basically that the Mandalorians are trying to retake Mandalore and trying to re-establish themselves in the galaxy, so they all agree that the Mandalorians need to be dealt with. I love this entire sequence. I thought there was some brilliant dialogue. I thought the acting and the performances was so much better than what we've had previously. I really enjoyed this opening section. I thought it was great. Then we have a small scene with all of the Mandalorians convening on Navarro, the Night Owls, and the Watch, and there's some really nice shots here of the fleet of the Mandalorians kind of passing over Navarro, and everybody's kind of in awe at the size of their light cruiser. And then we have this kind of standoff where the Mandalorians are kind of sizing each other up. They're not sure of each other because they're from different cultures. And I just thought the body language and the way this was shot was really kind of good. You didn't need any dialogue to make it feel tense and to make it feel awkward. And that was the whole purpose of this initial sort of meeting. And again, I thought this was great. Now, the next part of the episode was probably the only bit I didn't really like, and I know people are going to be critical of this because it sounds cool in concept, but IG-11 returns as expected. I said in my first review for the first episode of the season this will happen and it will be pointless, and I was kind of proven right. The entire first episode where they needed to recover parts for IG blah 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 was actually irrelevant and didn't need to happen because the Babu Frick race managed to fix him regardless without a memory core and all this stuff. and IG-11 kind of becomes like this mech suit for Grogu. Now, I did read about this in the leaks, and I thought it was stupid then, and I still think it's stupid because you can barely move in it, it doesn't really have any weapons, it doesn't have any protection, it is literally just a big walking bullseye for somebody to shoot Grogu out of it, and I think it's just kind of silly. He is legitimately more safe in the big metal ball. It closes up, it's faster, it has movement, it can fly. I don't see why you would trade it for this suit that literally can barely move. I think that's a bit stupid. But regardless, there was some funny scenes with Grogu in this suit because he's using the buttons to talk to the Mandalorian by saying yes and no, and the interactions between the two characters where Grogu is finally able to kind of talk to the Mandalorian just through yes or no answers was really kind of sweet, and I really enjoyed that, and it makes me excited for when Grogu can actually communicate, which I think should be happening by now in the show. This is where the episode starts to pick up a bit more. We have some more great dialogue here, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed this whole segment where they are kind of at the home camp for the Mandalorians, and Bo-Katan is discussing what they're going to do next and how they're going to retake Mandalore. She essentially lays out the plan about how a group is going to scout the surface, find the Great Forge, which is going to be their base of operations, and then the rest of the fleet is going to come down and secure that area of Mandalore for themselves. This is when, for the first time, the Night Owls and the Watch kind of come together and they agree this is better for the Mandalorians, this is what we're here for, and so a mixture of the Children of the Watch and a mixture of the Night Owls all stand up and they say that they will join the group for this kind of raiding party, or this scouting party rather. And then we get these really cool shots of the fleet once again leaving the surface of Navarro and flying to Mandalore, and it just looked good. It looked like it had scale, the CGI was good, and that continues later down the line in the episode. That is, for me, something that has been missing. This episode seems to use the volume in bits, but it also doesn't at times as well. So while you do have those closer up shots that you can really tell use the volume, you do have these other shots that give you that sense of vastness, that sense of just being big, which is what this show has really missed out on a visual level for me personally. The ship then goes down onto Mandalore and we get a drop sequence where they all fly out and they land on Mandalore's surface. And again, a stark contrast between the first 2 episodes or so, where Mandalore felt really claustrophobic because there was no wide shots. It just felt like a really awkward set with a big rock. Whereas here, yes, they had shots with the volume, they had those close-up shots where you kind of knew they were playing around with that technology, but they intertwined it, they had a nice balance with big, open, wide shots of Mandalore. Even though there wasn't much going on, it felt big, it felt vast, it felt like this episode had more scale than so many of the episodes prior. And for me, on a visual level, I just really appreciated that change, because up until this point, every episode has just felt small, and it has really just kind of felt, as I said, claustrophobic, and this episode changes that. Anyway, as they are walking across the surface, and they are looking for the Great Forge, they are greeted by a group of Mandalorians kind of on this sail barge kind of thing, who said they managed to survive the bombing and they were kind of just wandering around on the surface. Now, I liked these Mandalorian dudes. I thought they were acted well, they looked good, they did look rugged, and they looked kind of lost in a way, like outcasts kind of. So they basically introduce them into the group and they say, yeah, we can take you to the Great Forge. So they all get on this sail barge, and there's some more kind of world building in regards to the lore of the Mandalorians, especially Bo-Katan. We learn that she actually tried to surrender to the Empire to save her people and was betrayed, and this is why she feels so much kind of discomfort in the role of a leader, because she felt like she failed them already in the past. And there was a lovely little bit of dialogue, a lovely interaction between Din and Bo, and Din then basically reassures her and tells her, I follow you because of your character, because of who you are, not because of your status as a once leader of Mandalore. And I thought this interaction between Bo-Katan and Din Djarin from a dialogue standpoint was actually really good. I've been so critical of some of the cheesiness of the dialogue this season, and for some reason this episode is just a cut above everything else. Consistency, man, like it's just not here for this show. And again, while I do love the dynamic between Bo-Katan and the Mandalorian, which I think should be at the core of the show, Din, again, is just kind of sidelined in his own show. They said at Star Wars Celebration that this show is kind of evolving into a show about Mandalorians and not a show about Din Djarin, but for me personally, that is just not what they should be doing. This show is advertised as a continuation of the story of Din Djarin and Grogu, and if they wanted to make a show like this, where it is about the Mandalorian people and about the Mandalorians as a culture, then they really should have changed the name to The Mandalorians, or it should have been a separate show. That's just my personal opinion. As they're floating on the barge though, there's tension brewing between the two factions, the Night Owls and the Children of the Watch, and Paz Vizsla and the guy that followed Bo-Katan in the second season basically get into a little scuffle, and there is a fight on board the sail barge, and I thought this fight was fun. It was well shot, it looked good, especially as the sail barge was moving across Mandalore. And despite the Mandalorians saying, you know, we can't get involved, like they have to fight this out, Grogu gets in the middle of them and is spamming the no button on his IG-11 suit, and I thought this moment was really cute. You can see that perhaps he's even trying to inspire the other Mandalorians to work together a little bit more. I thought this was a nice little bit of growth for Grogu, who has done nothing this season really, and not much last season either, and so as much as I don't like the IG suit and I don't think the suit was a good idea, I thought this moment was pretty good in general. Now, of course, it wouldn't be Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and The Mandalorian itself without a big monster, so as they are on this sail barge and they're getting closer to the Great Forge, this giant rises out of the ground and essentially obliterates the entire sail barge, forcing all of the Mandalorians off. And this sequence, I thought, was both stupid and brilliant, because these guys have been on this sail barge and have been going across the surface of Mandalore for God knows how many years, since the Night of 1,000 Tears. And coincidentally, the first time our heroes and our main plot needs to be involved in regards to them, they're now attacked by a monster for the first time that destroys the sail barge in a few seconds. I thought that was kind of dumb and it was kind of convenient, but at the same time, this whole segment looked so damn good. The explosions, the monsters, the rocks. On a visual level, it reminded me so much more of the Crate Dragon from Season 2 than something from this season where the monsters looked a little bit iffy at times. Again, consistency. How does something like this, which is just kind of just a way to get the plot moving and isn't really relevant in any regard, why does this look better than the core aspect of one of the monster elements of a previous episode? Like, that consistency isn't there, and that is such a big problem for this show in general. Anyway, after being attacked, they are forced to run into a big cave, and they travel through the cave, and then they find the Great Forge. Again, some more dialogue here, some well-written dialogue. It adds a little bit more context to how people's lives were affected during the Great Purge. It adds a little bit of context to the Mandalorian factions within this group and how they survived and whatnot. However, they are instantly attacked by this group of white soldiers that are flying. They fly now. Apparently they forgot about that in Rise of Skywalker. But anyway, they all fly over. They kind of look like stormtroopers mixed in with a little bit of the First Order stormtroopers. And there's a big firefight on this cliff edge. And lots of people die. Lots of Mandalorians die. Lots of stormtroopers die. And so they basically start running from these stormtroopers who have basically free reign to shoot at them because they're on this open edge of cliff. And so they run through the forge and they get into this area that's starting to look a little bit like the First Order or the Empire, and you can kind of see what's going on here. You can connect the dots that this is actually where Moff Gideon is. He is in this section of Mandalore. But the action here was great. The sets were great. The way it was shot was great. It sounded great. It was just a really good sequence of action that wasn't overblown. It was moving naturally. And we ultimately run through this area that, as I said, looked a bit imperial. And Din Djarin then gets cut off. All of the Mandalorians essentially get trapped in this kind of box room between two blast doors, and he gets trapped on the other side, and then he is greeted by Moff Gideon, who is wearing this black armor that is made out of Beskar. They then basically overwhelm and capture Din, while all of the other Mandalorians just kind of stand there and watch because they're trapped in between these two blast doors, and they take him away, and Moff Gideon says to Bo-Katan, "Give me the dark saber and maybe I'll let you live." But we've had this exposition with the character beforehand where we know that Bo did that before and she was betrayed, so at this point she's like, okay, no. So she runs to the back, she starts cutting open the blast door with the dark saber, and Moff Gideon's just like, screw it, open the blast doors and kill them all. So the blast doors open, and Paz Vizsla with his big repeating blaster thing essentially just stands there and is acting as a kind of suppression fire or cover fire or whatever you want to call it, while all of these Mandalorians flee through the other blast door that Bo-Katan has cut open. They all manage to get out apart from Paz, who basically closes the blast door and says, "This is the way, like, I'm going to make sure all of you guys survive." So he gets into this massive fight with all of these stormtroopers, and for the first time all season, we had a segment of an episode where the tension actually had stakes. I wasn't expecting this character to die, like this wasn't something that I thought would happen, but he essentially locks himself behind and sacrifices himself so the rest of the Mandalorians can get away from Moff Gideon. And so, while they're all shooting him, his repeating blaster's overheating and all the bolts are pinging off his armor, and you can see it's slowly wearing him down physically, and then he defeats all of these first order stormtrooper guys, I don't know, like combinations, and then 3 Praetorian guards come out from The Last Jedi. Now, regardless of what you think of The Last Jedi, I thought these dudes were designed pretty well, and it was kind of cool to see them actually do something that was menacing and had presence, because I didn't really like the fight scene in the throne room, simply because the Praetorian guards were basically useless, like they were just spinning around and stuff, doing all these neat tricks. But in regards to the fight, they were basically just regular dudes. Whereas in this moment, for the first time, we saw these Praetorian guards be menacing. Like, they were almost unstoppable. Paz couldn't do anything against them. The 3 of them ganged up on Paz and basically toyed with him like he was trying to fight back, but they were just playing with their prey essentially. And they all stab him one by one and kill him, and I was like, yes, like finally we had a death, we had tension, we had emotion, like something has actually happened that has made me care. Yes, Paz wasn't the most well-rounded, but he has been a constant throughout the show. And to kill him off in such a way was both surprising, and it was a good thing for the story in general, because it adds to that tension and the stakes of the growing power of Moff Gideon and his kind of resurgent section of the Empire. And then the episode ends. But the TLDR for me was, we had some great dialogue, we had some great shots, we had some phenomenal action, we had character motives being explored, we had the psychologies of certain characters being explored, we finally have a villain that gave stakes to the narrative, we finally have a villain that actually felt menacing, we had moments of tension and surprise, and it was just a really, really good episode. And for me, it's the best episode of the season. It's actually, for me, been one of the best episodes of The Mandalorian in general. And I'm excited for the end of the show. I'm excited for the final episode. I'm not excited for the resolution to the story, because I don't think it's going to be cohesive enough to make me think, yeah, this season worked. But as a fan of Star Wars, I'm just looking forward to sitting down and just seeing what they do with the final episode and hopefully having a fun time with it. But As I said, from a narrative perspective, I do think this season is a write-off, and I think it has been a write-off since the last episode, to be honest. And I just hope it can conclude strongly, it can end well, so that when they move into Season 4, they know what to do. They know what elements they need to work on, what elements worked well here, and what elements worked poorly, and so they can grow from that, and they can make Season 4 the best season possible. But anyway, if you enjoyed the review, don't forget to hit the like button, it helps me out a great deal. And if you want to see my review for the final episode of The Mandalorian Season 3, perhaps consider hitting the subscribe button so you are notified when that video goes live next Wednesday. I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, may the Force be with you. Always.